Story 1. Elias Thorne had seen the best and worst of the human psyche published in newsprint, but nothing in his 40 years as a journalist. Not the political corruption in Charleston, nor the endless, grim reporting from the Vietnam draft lists, had prepared him for the silent, creeping madness that was descending upon Point Pleasant, West Virginia, in the cold, damp autumn of 1966. The air itself felt heavy, not just with the usual riverside humidity, but with a palpable, sickening anxiety. It clung to the clapboard houses, seeped into the coal smoke curling from chimneys, and muffled the few conversations that dared to take place on Main Street. The entire town was draped in a gray, psychological pall that had settled firmly on November 16, the day the Mothman officially arrived. Elias sat in his makeshift home office, a converted shed behind his dilapidated rental near the Ohio River bank, the single 40-watt bulb casting a feeble, yellow glow over stacks of police reports and eyewitness testimonials. He was attempting to write a column for the local paper, something grounding, something rational, but every time his fingers hovered over the keys of his Remington, the sheer, undeniable absurdity of the situation locked them up. How do you rationalize a nightmare? The first accounts were easy to dismiss. Teenagers, spooked near the abandoned World War II-era TNT plant, a sprawling, overgrown complex of concrete bunkers and polluted acreage known locally as the Weldon Creek Wildlife Refuge, which everyone knew was anything but. They spoke of a large, gray figure, bigger than a man, with glowing red eyes. But then came the Scarberrys and the Malignos, driving out near the plant, who described a monstrous creature with wings folded back, standing taller than the car's roof, its eyes like blazing bicycle reflectors. They fled, hearing a shriek that sounded like a generator failing. Elias had interviewed them all. They weren't hysterical. They weren't drunk. They were simply, profoundly terrified. He had seen that particular shade of shock before, usually on the faces of people who had just survived a car wreck they couldn't believe they walked away from. He picked up the latest report, typed out by Deputy Millard Halstead, a man with the patience of a saint and the sobriety of a Quaker. Halstead, initially the biggest skeptic, reported finding a large dog, a German Shepherd, in the field near the creek. He described it as a mangled, furless thing, torn up, but not by a coyote or a bear. What chilled Elias wasn't the description, but the single, parenthetical note Halstead added at the bottom: smelled like ozone and burnt sugar. Elias pushed the papers away. The sightings were escalating. It started as a phantom near the desolate TNT area. Now, it was being spotted near the city limits, gliding silently over power lines, or standing, sentinel-like, on the flat roof of the National Guard Armory. People were talking about more than a monster, they were talking about a harbinger. For a small town like Point Pleasant, already shadowed by the vast, black water of the river and the economic gloom, the Mothman wasn't just a cryptid, it was a physical manifestation of an impending disaster, a terrible celestial warning. Elias felt it, too, a tremor beneath the surface of reality, a countdown he couldn't hear but could feel humming in his bones. He stood up, pulling on a heavy woolen jacket. The cold was different tonight, sharp, metallic, and strangely still. There was no wind to carry the scent of the river, only the faint, acrid smell of ozone, like the air after lightning struck nearby. Elias grabbed his heavy-duty flashlight and headed out, his reporter's instinct, old, battered, but still twitching, overriding his common sense. He wasn't going to the TNT plant, he was going to the Silver Bridge. The Silver Bridge was an impressive, modern marvel, a steel structure spanning the Ohio River, connecting Point Pleasant to Canoga, Ohio. It was sleek, suspension style, and built to handle the heavy interstate traffic. Tonight, however, it looked less like a testament to human ingenuity and more like a massive, silver skeleton, its intricate network of eye-bar chains catching the high beams of passing cars like thin, brittle bones. Elias parked his old Ford sedan beneath the massive steel lattice on the West Virginia side. The rhythmic thump-thump of tires passing overhead was the only consistent sound, a percussive reminder of the hundreds of lives being supported, moment by moment, by the tensile strength of the metal. He walked toward the riverbank, the rough gravel crunching under his boots. He hadn't told anyone where he was going. He just needed to stand somewhere solid, somewhere built by men, and listen to the insanity. As he reached the edge of the water, the familiar, comforting smell of river silt was almost completely masked by that metallic scent. He clicked on his flashlight. Its powerful beam cut a swath through the humid air, illuminating the moss-slicked rocks and tangled reeds near the shoreline. That's when he heard it. It wasn't the generator shriek the witnesses described. It was a lower, more profound sound, like a bass chord played on an impossible instrument. A deep, resonant whrrrrrm that seemed to originate not from the air, but from the ground, vibrating up through the soles of his boots. It made the small bones in his ears ache. Elias froze, dropping his flashlight, which clattered on the rocks and spun, the beam shooting erratically into the shadows beneath the bridge. For a frantic moment, he searched for it. When he recovered the light and steadied it, he realized the sound had stopped. Everything was silent again, save for the faint traffic thump-thump far above. He scanned the underbelly of the bridge, half expecting to see a structural failure, a snapped cable or a warped support beam, but the steel lattice was flawless, stark, and cold in the light. Elias took a slow, shaky breath. "It's just the wind," he muttered, though there was no wind. "It's just the river." He started to turn back toward his car, when a sudden, blinding flash of light erupted 50 feet away, closer to the central pier of the bridge. It wasn't the smooth, white light of a car's high beam. It was ragged, crackling, and pulsed with an unnatural, violet hue. The air immediately filled with the sharp, overwhelming smell of burnt copper and hot static. He raised the flashlight beam, shielding his eyes with his free hand. The light was focused on a massive, concrete support pylon. And on the pylon, standing at least 9 feet tall, was the thing. It wasn't flying. It wasn't gliding. It was just standing there, motionless, anchored to the rough concrete like a bizarre, biological gargoyle. Its body was indiscernible, merely a vast, charcoal gray mass that absorbed the light of the flashlight, refusing to show shape or texture. But its head, it barely had one, only a thick, low neck sloping into the shoulders. And the eyes. The eyes were not merely red, nor were they merely reflecting light. They were twin, perfectly circular crimson portals, pulsating with an internal, biological luminescence. They held no recognizable pupil or iris. They were simply two wells of terrible, hateful color, staring directly through the violet, crackling air, and directly through Elias. They were not the eyes of an animal, or a man, or a monster. They were the eyes of pure, cold necessity, eyes that regarded him with the calm indifference of an impending natural disaster. A soundless, involuntary gasp escaped Elias's throat, tasting like salt and ozone. He couldn't move, couldn't run. The creature raised its massive, folded wings, wings of leathery, pitted flesh that seemed to absorb the light, making the creature look impossibly vast. The action was slow, deliberate, a warning more chilling than any sudden lunge. And then, a tiny, almost inaudible metallic ping drifted down from the structure above, a sound too small for the vastness of the river and the bridge, but one that Elias, the retired journalist, the skeptic, instantly recognized. It was the sound of steel failing. As the Mothman unfurled its wings, completely blotting out the violet light and revealing its grotesque scale, the creature shifted its gaze, momentarily breaking contact with Elias. Those awful red eyes didn't look at the river, or the town, or the man. They looked straight up, fixated on a point high in the tangled mesh of the Silver Bridge's support system. It wasn't a warning. It was a witness. Elias finally moved, a primal terror overriding his shock. He backed away slowly, never breaking visual contact with the twin red glows, until he stumbled against the door of his car. He fumbled for the handle, his gaze locked on the creature, which remained silent and still, simply observing the skeletal bridge overhead. He wrenched the door open, threw himself inside, and slammed it shut, the sound echoing hollowly. He started the engine, threw the car into reverse, and tore out of the parking spot, tires spinning on the gravel. As he sped away, he glanced quickly in his rearview mirror. The creature was gone. The violet light was gone. Only the silver bridge remained, its silver bones stark against the night sky, humming its own silent, ominous song. But he knew it wasn't gone. It was just above him now, waiting. And he knew, with a certainty that settled like ice in his stomach, that it wasn't there to kill the people, but to observe the death of the bridge. He had to tell someone, but who would believe that the harbinger of a structural collapse was a creature with red, glowing eyes? Elias sped back toward the town, the image of the creature superimposed upon the rhythmic, comforting thump-thump of the unsuspecting traffic passing over the doomed structure. The pall was lifting, replaced by a terrible, clear-eyed dread. Point Pleasant was not just haunted, it was marked. The monster wasn't the event. The monster was the countdown. Story 2. The credibility chasm. Elias drove as fast as the icy terror in his chest would allow, the humid West Virginia air rushing past the cracked windshield of his Ford. He didn't slow until the faint, distant pulse of the Silver Bridge vanished behind the curve of the highway. He found himself at the Mason County Sheriff's Office, a squat, brick building that smelled perpetually of old coffee and stale tobacco. He stumbled through the double doors and found Deputy Millard Halstead, the same Halstead who had meticulously documented the mangled dog and the scent of burnt sugar, sitting behind the duty desk, his face etched with exhaustion. Halstead was a big man, slow-moving, with eyes that had seen too much small-town sorrow. "Elias," Halstead said, his voice flat. "Didn't think I'd see a reporter this side of the county lines this late. Get another tip about the bird?" Elias leaned heavily on the counter, trying to keep the frantic tremor out of his voice. He realized his pupils must still be dilated from the shock. He felt raw, stripped of the layers of professional detachment he'd built over decades. "Millard, you have to call it in. The bridge. I was just under it. Near the Point Pleasant side, the main pier support. I heard a sound. A definite metallic ping. Like a cable giving way. And the vibrations, they were wrong." Halstead put down his coffee cup with excruciating slowness. "Wrong, Elias. The whole damn bridge is groaning 24 hours a day. It's an old structure. Heavy traffic. She rattles. No. This was different. This was a warning shot," Elias insisted, leaning closer, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Look, Millard. I saw it. The thing. The Mothman. It was standing on the support pillar, staring straight up at the superstructure. It wasn't there to scare me. It was there to watch the bridge." Halstead's expression didn't change, but his eyes seemed to retract, pulling back behind a wall of official disbelief. He picked up a pen and fiddled with it. "Elias, you've been talking to those kids too much. They're good kids, but they're scared, and they've got active imaginations. Roger Scarberry's got a reputation for tall tales, you know that. But I saw it, Millard. 9 feet tall, leathery wings, the violet light, the ozone smell. It was an observer, a harbinger of structural failure. I'm telling you, You need to get the Army Corps of Engineers or the State Highway Department down here to check the I-bar chains, specifically the suspension system, before tomorrow morning." The deputy sighed, leaning back in his chair. "You just undermined your whole professional report, son. If you came in and said, 'I heard a sound and I'm worried about metal fatigue,' I'd put in a call. But you're telling me a 10-foot-tall demon with ruby eyes is predicting the collapse. That moves this from a structural report to a psych evaluation. Damn it, Millard, you yourself reported the smell of burnt sugar and ozone." "I reported what I smelled, Elias. I don't know what caused it. Maybe a transformer blew. Maybe it was a damn skunk. I didn't report seeing a monster. Now, you go home, have a drink, and get some rest. I'll make a note about your concern over a loud ping, and pass it on to the night shift, but that's the best I can do." Halstead looked at him with genuine, heavy pity. "I won't even log the rest of it." Elias stood there, utterly defeated. Halstead's pity was worse than outright dismissal. It was the crushing weight of institutional inertia, backed by the impossibility of the truth. He was no longer a credible witness. He was simply another man unhinged by the atmosphere of Point Pleasant. He left the sheriff's office, the weight of the night pressing down on him tenfold. The thump-thump of the bridge traffic, which he had heard even inside the station, now sounded like a mocking drumbeat. The lives of hundreds, the commuters, the truckers, the families, were riding on a chain of steel that he knew, deep in his gut, had been compromised. And he had failed to stop the clock. The night was now a hostile entity. Elias couldn't go back to his rental shed. The silence there would be unbearable. He needed allies, people who also saw the world as it truly was now, fractured, shadowed, and presided over by a terrible, mute prophet. He needed the Malignos and the Scarberries. They were the original group, the ones whose terror had paved the way for his own. If he could convince them that the creature was not merely a random haunting but a signal of imminent, terrestrial danger, maybe they could warn the town together. He drove toward the Maligno's place, deep in the countryside near the border of the TNT plant. The narrow, unpaved road was flanked by dense, skeletal winter trees. The moonlight was swallowed by the thick, low cloud cover, forcing him to rely entirely on his high beams, which bounced erratically on the potholes. He finally reached the small, isolated farmhouse. It looked like a fortress under siege. Every window was shut, blinds drawn tight. A single bare bulb illuminated the porch, casting stark shadows. He saw the gleam of metal, a rifle resting against the living room window frame. Elias got out, feeling exposed and vulnerable. He approached the porch and knocked sharply. It took a full minute for the heavy oak door to be opened, and then only a crack, revealing the cautious, weary face of Linda Scarberry's brother-in-law, Robert Maligno. Robert was a wiry man, usually quick to laugh, but his face was now drawn and pale, his eyes darting into the darkness behind Elias. "Elias Thorne. What in God's name do you want? It's almost 2 in the morning. Robert, I need to talk to Tina and Roger. All of you. Now. It's important. It's not just about what you saw." Robert squinted, his grip tightening on the door frame. "It's all anyone sees, Elias. It's been hanging over us like a funeral shroud. But we ain't talking about it anymore. The preacher says it's the devil's work. The police say we're drunk. We're done. The creature. The Mothman," Elias persisted, pushing past Robert's resistance. "It's not trying to frighten you, Robert. It's trying to tell you something. It's tied to the bridge. To an accident. I need to know if you've seen it again, or if you've felt it." Robert hesitated. He scanned the dark fields behind Elias again, then finally opened the door enough to let him in. "Keep your voice down. Tina's sleeping. Or trying to." The house was stifling hot, The air thick with the metallic scent Elias now instinctively associated with the creature. Ozone, mixed with the faint, cloying sweetness of burnt sugar. The windows were not only locked and covered, but the seams had been taped shut with masking tape, a desperate attempt to keep the unseen out. In the living room, Tina Maligno, barely 18, sat huddled on the sofa, clutching a large, leather-bound Bible. Beside her, Roger Scarberry, the 19-year-old driver of the car during the first sighting, was cleaning an antique shotgun. He looked up, his face gaunt. "Mr. Thorne," Roger said, his voice flat. "The paper already ran the story. What more is there to say? We saw a giant bird, we got scared, the end." The end. Elias walked toward them, shedding his jacket. "Roger, the thing I saw tonight was not a bird. It was looking at the silver bridge like a clock waiting to strike 12. I believe it's an omen for a tragedy, and I think it's trying to communicate that to us. Not through screams, but something else." He turned to Tina. She looked tiny, fragile, lost in the vastness of the sofa. "Tina, you were the most frightened. You were the first one to say it had eyes that were like reflectors on a bike. Have you heard anything since? Anything strange on the radio or the TV? Or maybe in your head?" Tina's hands trembled against the Bible cover. She looked at her husband, Robert, who gave a nearly imperceptible nod. "After the sighting," Tina began, her voice a reedy whisper, "we couldn't sleep. The radio, it kept cutting out. Static, high-pitched. Then, the TV. It was late, past midnight. We were watching an old war movie, and the screen just turned to snow. But the sound was still there. That low, bass drone, Mr. Thorne. The WHRRR. Elias's blood ran cold. He had heard that sound beneath the bridge, a structural vibration. Tina was hearing it through white noise. What did it sound like, Tina? Could you hear words? Tina shook her head violently, tears welling up. Not words. Not English. It was pressure. Like someone was trying to force a thought into my brain, and the drone was the noise of the effort. But once, just once, I heard something clear. When the snow on the screen was thickest." She paused, gripping the Bible so hard her knuckles were white. Roger and Robert watched her with grim intensity. "I heard a voice. But it wasn't a man's voice, or a woman's. It was hollow, like it came from inside a well. And it said a date. December 15th. Roger interjected, his voice raw. "She was dreaming, Mr. Thorne. Just a bad dream." "No," Tina cried, startling them all. "I was wide awake. I was watching the snow. December 15th. It didn't say December. It said December. And when it said it, the picture on the TV flickered back for just a second. And the whole screen, it was just the silver bridge. Looking like it does from the river bank. Dark. But the lights were all wrong, like a reflection on shattered glass." Elias felt a terrifying, chilling clarity settle over him. The Mothman wasn't a biological entity wandering around. It was a trans-dimensional observer trying to punch through the barrier of reality, utilizing the town's anxiety and electronic static to deliver a specific, terrifying prophecy. And the prophecy was less than a month away. December 15th, Elias repeated, writing the date down in his notebook. That was a Wednesday. A busy shopping day, 3 days before Christmas, when the bridge traffic would be at its peak. "What about the creature itself, Tina?" Elias asked gently. "Did you feel it looking at you? Like you were a witness, too?" "Yes," Tina whispered, burying her face in the Bible. "I keep thinking about the eyes. They don't look at you, Mr. Thorne. They look through you. They look at what's coming next. And I think it wants us to look, too." Elias stayed at the Maligno house for another hour, meticulously documenting every detail. The sealed windows, the smell, the frequency of the radio and TV static, the exact wording of the prophecy, and the brief, terrifying visual of the broken bridge. He left with a sense of horrifying purpose. The sheriff wouldn't listen to him. The town was too paralyzed by fear and dismissal to listen to itself, and the bridge was counting down. Elias Thorne had one objective: to prevent the Mothman's prophecy from being fulfilled. He drove back toward town, but instead of going home, he pulled up to the only 24-hour establishment in Point Pleasant, the River's Edge Diner. He needed coffee, and he needed a plan. The diner was sparsely populated. A couple of truckers, a lonely state trooper on break, and Mrs. Gable, the owner, wiping down the chrome counter with a weary cloth. Elias slid into a booth, spread his notes, and ordered the strongest cup of coffee she had. As he was documenting the coordinates of the TNT plant's main observation tower, the supposed locus of the sightings, he heard a strange, rhythmic clicking sound coming from the kitchen. "Mrs. Gable," Elias called out. "Is your fryer acting up?" Mrs. Gable walked out, holding a greasy cloth. "No, Mr. Thorne. That's the ice maker. Been doing that all week. Sounds like Morse code. Keeps skipping a beat. Morse code." Elias listened. Click, click, click. Click, click. Click, click, click. It was rapid, erratic, but it had an unnatural pattern to it. He dismissed it, focusing back on his notes, but the paranoia was now a living thing, squirming under his skin. If the creature can hijack a TV's audio signal, why not a cheap motor? He thought of the bridge again. The steel. The tension. The sudden ping of metal failure. Elias had a background in engineering reporting from his early days. He knew the Silver Bridge was one of the first in the country to use an advanced, highly tensioned I-bar chain suspension system. Each link was critical. A failure in one meant cascading failure in the whole system. The constant vibration from the increasing traffic load, year after year, stressed the metal far beyond its original design specs. He had heard of a professor at the West Virginia University School of Engineering who specialized in metal fatigue and stress corrosion, Dr. Alistair Finch. If anyone could understand the ping and the WHRRR as a structural warning, it was him. Elias tore a fresh page in his notebook and began sketching out a new plan. 3 urgent steps that had to be completed before the sun rose and the bridge once again became a teeming thoroughfare. Contact Dr. Finch. Get him to listen to the ping and the technical details of the bridge structure without mentioning the creature. Focus entirely on the structural integrity report. Verify the prophecy. December 15th. Check the local school calendar, the TNT plant's old shift schedules, and the upcoming traffic projections for that specific date. Find out what made that day special. Return to the locus. Go back to the TNT plant, the creature's original hunting ground, in the daylight. If the Mothman was an observer, it would leave traces. He needed physical evidence, not just fear. He looked at the date in his notebook, November 18, 1966. 27 days until December 15th. Elias realized that his career, his reputation, and his sanity were all staked on this terrible, impossible crusade. He was no longer a reporter. He was a man standing in the path of an avalanche, armed only with a fountain pen and a date whispered by a demon in the static. The sun rose over the river, painting the bridge in a pale, deceptive gold. Elias had been on the phone since 6 a.m., using every journalistic contact he had to get a hold of Dr. Finch. Finally, around 8:30 a.m., he reached the professor, a man with a heavy southern accent and a tendency toward mathematical precision. Elias spoke for 20 minutes, his voice tight, focused only on the engineering facts. He described the I-bar chain, the increasing traffic density, The specific ping he heard, and the low-frequency WHRRR vibration he felt near the central pier. He deliberately omitted any mention of glowing eyes or giant wings. "Mr. Thorne," Dr. Finch said, his voice slow and deliberate over the crackling line. "I'm looking at the bridge schematics now. It's a fantastic design for its time, but these I-bar chains. They are a classic case study in non-redundant failure. If one link fails, the chain goes, and the whole thing comes down like a deck of cards. The fact that you felt a low-frequency hum suggests a harmonic resonance, a very dangerous vibration that can stress metal far beyond its yield point, often originating from something like high wind or unusual traffic loads." "And the ping?" Elias pressed. "A sudden failure sound. That's highly alarming. That's a stress fracture, Mr. Thorne. Given the known issues with stress corrosion cracking in this type of steel alloy, especially in a humid river environment, it could be a catastrophic warning." Elias felt a moment of vindication. "So, you believe a full, immediate inspection is warranted? A shutdown, even?" A pause followed. "Based purely on the technical details you provided, yes. I will draft an unofficial recommendation immediately, citing your observations. But Mr. Thorne, I must know, where did you get this information? Why are you, a local columnist, the one calling in this kind of detail?" This was the trap. Elias had to maintain the credibility he had painstakingly built with the professor. "I was doing a story on the psychological toll the bridge takes on the town, sir. It's a huge landmark, and people worry about it. I spent time beneath the structure, listening. I brought a sound engineer's sensitive parabolic dish, though I left that part out. I just wanted to report what I heard accurately. A lie of omission, but a necessary one." "A sound engineer's dish," Dr. Finch mused. "Very well. I'll send the recommendation through official channels. But those channels move slowly, Mr. Thorne. The West Virginia Highway Department is not known for speed." Elias hung up, the small victory feeling hollow. He had bought a few days, maybe a week, but not the immediate shutdown he needed. He had to assume the official warning would be lost in bureaucratic red tape. Now for step 2. December 15th. He called the local Chamber of Commerce. The woman on the other end, cheerful and oblivious, rattled off the holiday schedule. "Oh, December 15th. That's the Wednesday before Christmas, honey. That's always the busiest day for shoppers coming over from Ohio to hit our Christmas fair and the outlets. Traffic will be 3 times the usual volume. The bridge will be bumper to bumper all afternoon." The Mothman hadn't chosen a random date. It had chosen the day of maximum vulnerability and loss of life. Step 3. The TNT plant. By noon, Elias was back at the Weldon Creek Wildlife Refuge, the abandoned TNT plant where the sightings had begun. It was a wasteland of forgotten concrete and tangled brush, the air heavy with the ghost of ammonia and sulfur. This time, the silence was worse than the night's terror. He approached the famous Power magazine building, a large, crumbling concrete bunker, half covered in vines. This was the spot Roger Scarberry claimed the creature launched from. Elias walked slowly, his reporter's instinct fighting his adrenal gland. He wasn't looking for monster tracks. He was looking for traces of the violet light, the ozone. He wore heavy leather gloves, ready to collect samples if he found anything. He noticed that the local teenagers, desperate for a story, had spray-painted crude drawings of the creature on the walls. A stick figure with giant wings and 2 red circles for eyes. But near the base of the massive bunker, Elias found something that was not graffiti. Embedded in the dark, damp earth near the concrete foundation were 3 massive, parallel indentations. They were too long and deep to be boot prints. They looked almost like fingerprints of a massive, impossibly heavy hand that had used the earth as a momentary grip. And then, he saw it. Not an eyeball, but a fragment of terrestrial evidence. Tucked into the crack between the earth and the concrete, where the vegetation met the bunker, was a clump of stiff, wiry hair. It was a dull, dark gray, almost black, but when Elias carefully pulled it out with tweezers and held it up to the pale winter sun, the filaments caught the light with an unnatural, silver sheen, like polished graphite. He placed the hairs in an envelope and sealed it. That wasn't the strangest part. As he was looking down, he noticed the small, flat, white quartz stones littering the area had a bizarre characteristic. They were cracked, not smashed, but internally fractured in perfectly straight lines radiating out from the center, as if they had been exposed to an enormous, momentary spike of microwave radiation. He had the physical evidence. Impossible hair, fractured stone, and the scent of burnt sugar still faintly lingering in the cold air. The Mothman was a real physical entity, heavy enough to grip the earth, yet capable of generating incredible, non-thermal electromagnetic energy. It was a creature of physics, not folklore, a creature that could manipulate the electrical atmosphere of Point Pleasant and use it as a medium for prophecy. Elias packed his bag. He had the engineering angle, the prophetic date, and the physical evidence. It was enough to create a front-page exposé that would rock the entire state, forcing an immediate, temporary closure of the Silver Bridge for inspection. He raced back to his office shed, his heart hammering with a terrifying mix of dread and journalistic zeal. He would write the story now, sacrificing his credibility on the altar of public safety. But as he opened the door to his shed, he stopped dead. The light bulb, which he had left burning weakly, was now violently flickering. The air conditioning unit was cycling erratically, making a grinding, electrical noise. And all his notes, his meticulously organized police reports, the Scarberry Maligno transcripts, the engineering sketches, the envelope with the Mothman hair, they were all scattered across the room, not blown by the wind, but scattered by an unseen hand. He rushed to the Remington typewriter. The keys were depressed, seemingly at random. But when he looked closely at the sheet of paper still stuck in the roller, he saw a single line of text, hammered out in violent, jagged letters. WHYAREYOUFIXINGTHEWATCH. The words were not written in the familiar style of Elias's own typing. They were spaced oddly, as if the writer didn't understand the machine. Elias stepped back, the hair standing up on his arms. The creature wasn't just observing the disaster, it was aware of his attempt to prevent it. The Mothman was not just a prophet, but a guardian of the timeline. He was no longer just a witness. He was now a target. The game had changed from documentation to desperate, personal survival, and the countdown to December 15th was ticking louder than ever. He grabbed the scattered papers, stuffing them into his briefcase, knowing he couldn't stay here. He had to go to Charleston, get his editor to run the story, and force the closure. But first, he needed to get the terrifying note and the hair samples to the one man who had ever truly believed his crazy story, Deputy Millard Halstead. Elias was desperate. He needed a witness to his own escalating persecution. The metallic, burnt sugar scent was now thick in his small shed. He fled, locking the door behind him, leaving the flickering light and the grinding machine as a monument to the creature's violation of his sanctuary. He knew the creature would be watching the bridge, but he now realized it was also watching him. He was the wrench in the inevitable collapse, and the Mothman was determined to remove him. Elias stopped his car a block from the sheriff's office. He couldn't go in. The "Why are you fixing the watch?" note felt like a death warrant. He had to communicate the threat without implicating himself further in a web of lunacy. He found a payphone booth outside a closed market. He dialed the sheriff's office again. Halstead picked up on the second ring. Sheriff's office. Halstead speaking. Millard, it's Elias. Listen, I can't come in. You have to believe me. I was at the TNT plant, and the Mothman was in my office just now. It typed a message to me on my Remington. It knows I'm trying to warn people. Halstead's voice was tight, but calmer than before. Elias, where are you? We had a call from Mrs. Gable at the diner. She said you were looking manic. Don't worry about me. I need you to do two things. First, there's a Dr. Finch at WVU. He's writing an unofficial memo to the Highway Department, urging an immediate inspection of the Silver Bridge I-bar chains based on my sound analysis. You need to follow up on that. You need to make sure that memo doesn't get buried. I hear you, Elias. What's the second thing? Elias swallowed, his throat dry. The hair. I found hair at the TNT site. Not fur. Hair. Like graphite. I also found a date. December 15th. That's the day the bridge is going to fall, Millard. It's a countdown. Halstead finally lost his composure. Elias, you're talking nonsense. A note, a hair, a date. This is just fear talking. Get in here, Elias. We'll get you a doctor, a good night's sleep. This whole town is frayed, and you're snapping. Stop running. I can't stop running, Millard. It's following me. It's protecting the inevitable. Look, I'm sending the package to you. The hair and the note. It's physical proof. I'm mailing it to the sheriff's office from the main post office in Charleston. Don't open it. Send the hair for analysis. Tell them it's from an unidentified predator. Just get it done. Elias slammed the phone down. He drove out of Point Pleasant, turning his back on the doomed town. He felt a terrible sense of failure, but also a new, focused intensity. He couldn't trust the police, the engineers, or the townsfolk. He had only 26 days left to dismantle the Mothman's prophecy, one piece at a time. The first step was to find the other people the creature had touched. He needed Tina and Roger Maligno, and he needed them to start talking to the world. He drove onto the interstate, his eyes fixed on the rearview mirror, half expecting to see a giant, winged silhouette keeping pace with his Ford. But the night was clear, the road empty, and the only sound was the frantic beating of his own heart, echoing the rhythm of the countdown. Elias pulled into the parking lot of a motel well outside the city limits. He sat in the dark, clutching his briefcase. He opened the notes. December 15th. He had to find out why. Was the Mothman simply a creature of natural disaster, or was it a terrible agent, tasked with ensuring a catastrophe for a reason he couldn't yet comprehend? He had to call his editor, Frank, a man who wouldn't believe a word of this, but who would recognize a Pulitzer Prize headline if it was handed to him on a bloody platter. He picked up the phone. His hand was shaking violently. He knew the moment he made this call, he would be ruined professionally, but he wouldn't be able to live with himself if he didn't try. Frank, it's Elias Thorne. I have the story of the decade. No, the century. It's about the Silver Bridge. And a thing with red eyes that is watching it fall. Thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to subscribe, like, comment and turn on notifications if you enjoyed the video so you never miss an upload.